Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. We're looking forward to an update from Dart Mining and what the company's been up to. We'll hear a short presentation from the Chairman and Managing Director, Mr. James Chirnside, to talk to us about the current drilling at the exciting new lithium project at Dorchap and other activities that the company has ongoing and into the future. So welcome, James. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Pete. Good morning, everyone.
All right, why don't you take us through what's been going on in recent times and let the shareholders hear what is happening.
Will do. Okay, we'll deal with the formalities, if you like, the forward-looking statement, which no doubt most people are familiar with. A very quick snapshot of the board. There's myself and Dean Turnbull, who's a founder of the company. He's a geologist, and Dean essentially oversees direction of our exploration activities in conjunction with our recently appointed manager of exploration, or head of exploration, Mr. Owen Greenberger, who's a geologist, as you'd expect. Richard Adevanya is the third member of the board. He is a lawyer specialist in resources law, based out of Melbourne, and has been associated in one way or another with Dart Mining for a long time. Our exploration footprint, and many people tuning in this morning probably understand that we've got a large footprint, but just in summary, we've fairly recently updated all of our prospects and projects across all of our footprint. We've got, roughly speaking, 80, in fact, I think there's 83 geological targets across 6 regions, mostly within the northeast of Victoria, but we do have some ground up in New South Wales as well. That is made up of essentially, or importantly, 9 historic goldfields, as well as more than 1,000 of the lithium, cesium, tantalum type pegmatite dikes. On top of that, within our footprint, we have 8 copper gold and moly copper porphyry targets. Some work has been done on those, and we can get to that a bit later on. Our geographic focus is in northeast Victoria, but it's not constrained to that, hence some ground that we've fairly recently applied for or been granted in New South Wales. But safe to say that we're looking carefully up and down the Lachlan Fold Belt. The geological setting can be, again, split to 3 different types, if you like: orogenic gold, porphyry, bulk tonnage, copper gold, moly copper silver, and lithium, cesium, tantalum pegmatites. So in summary, commodity exposures to precious metals, base metals, and critical minerals.
James, on that 6,500 square kilometres, there wouldn't be many juniors in Victoria who've got that kind of footprint across such a diverse geological portfolio.
Well, look, it's a large footprint, but it's not a land grab. Dart have been operating, essentially within that established footprint for a long time, and we understand a lot of very intimately, the geology within our footprint. And we've dropped land in the past, and we've acquired new ground, which we think is highly prospective. So it's been very carefully selected. It's not like some kind of mega peg, where we did see that actually up in New South Wales, where a company put applications in for like 15,000 square kilometres of land, of ground, tenement area. So ours is very selective. Within every bit of that 6,500 k's, we've got some really attractive prospects. So just moving on, it really is a Lachlan Fold Belt focus. Straight into a deal which we struck last year in July, which is a joint venture farm-in agreement with SQM. SQM are one of the largest lithium producers in the world. We had been speaking to them for some years. They were well aware of our lithium prospectivity before we struck the deal. The deal, in summary, is an earning joint venture, as I mentioned, with a committed $12 million of capital that is to be put towards lithium exploration. The terms are for a spend of $3 million, that earns 30%. For an additional $3 million, that earns 21%, taking the economics to over 50% at stage 2. And then the third stage, they earn 19%, taking them to a total of 70% of the project, leaving Dart with 30%, I'm here to add. And from that point on, we're funding it dollar for dollar. It's very important to realise, particularly in this market where it's been, incredibly tough. This really is GFC 2 for the small cap market generally, but particularly in the resources space. Important to note that we've got around 10.2 million of the 12 million yet to spend, and we've got well-established and a work schedule through to the end of 2024, and I'll get to the plans on that in a minute. So we've got a really tier 1 joint venture partner. They're a really good company to work with. We've had absolutely no issues at all. They've been incredibly supportive and remain so.
James, on that, having SQM technical people on the ground, that must be quite a benefit for you to learn what their understanding of what you're seeing in the pegmatites and how the geology works. What have you picked up from that association out on site with a technical team from SQM?
Well, that's true, Pete. I mean, lithium's quite a new thing to markets, and but SQM have been in the lithium game since the 80s. They have a tremendous depth of knowledge technically. They've spent a lot of money internally in refining their exploration techniques and things like that. And as an example of that, actually, right now, we're doing a heap of geochemical analysis. So we have, over 5-6 years, Dart's collected an enormous amount of rock chips. We've done a lot of soil sampling, and we've done fairly extensive drilling so far, and we've got a lot more to do. But in there lies a huge amount of geochemical data, and that is under the spotlight at the moment with SQM. They're helping us on that. So they've got specialists who deal in it, and that is precisely what's going on amongst a couple of other exploration activities right now. So moving on to the work schedule for 2024, our priority project naturally would be the Dorchap Lithium. So there's continuation of surface sampling and mapping. As an example of that, we, and to point 2 on this slide, ground truthing of LiDAR identified outcrops last year. So we did a LiDAR survey. We uncovered a raft of new outcropping rock, all of which is being ground truthed to determine A, whether it is pegmatite or some other kind of rock, and B, whether or not it's carrying any grade or whether the chemistries are right. Interestingly, on our ground truthing so far of these new targets, we are getting about a 9 out of 10 strike rate on them being pegmatites. So it's not a huge surprise, but it's nice to get that confirmation. Next year, and look, we've got permits, applications for permits in at the moment with the various departments in Victoria, and we're working through the permitting process, which involves engagement with stakeholders and that sort of thing. We would expect to start drilling roughly 3,000 meters on a new group of pegmatites next year, probably around March, April. We hope to get that underway. It is, as I mentioned before, all of that is fully funded. The group of pegmatites that we'll be drilling are called the Gosport. And so far, from all of our analysis so far, they look to be the most interesting. They're confirmed spodumene from XRD analysis, and we can't wait to get the drill in on that. But we have to cut some tracks in and stuff like that, and that's why we can't get to it earlier. Other projects of priority for us at the moment are Walwa, which is a lithium. It's actually a historic, actually relatively contemporary tin mine. It was a tin mine that shut operations in 1975 as a result of low tin prices. Walwa is actually not a part of the assets in the joint venture, but you'd hope and you'd think that the natural next step there would be to possibly include those. But we've actually sampled some pegmatites up there, and we know that they are carrying some lithium. They're the right chemistry. Granite Flat is a copper gold porphyry bulk tonnage project. And we've done a lot of drilling. We've done a lot of soil sampling. I think we've narrowed the footprint in on the geochemical samples to narrow about 3 kilometers by 2. And because we've got so much historic drilling data, we've got huge amount of geochemical data. We did, those that have been with us for a while would know we did a lot of geophysical work there about 2 years ago as well. That combined with the contemporary drilling, we've decided to get a review and see how all that stacks together to decide on our next steps and next targets. At the same time, some of that geophysical data is actually being reinterpreted, which is not unusual in geophysical data. So that's happening. So essentially, Granite Flat is just under review at the moment, just so that we can get a better picture by bringing all of the data available together. Our intention at this stage is to begin diamond drilling on that later on this year, and that would be with Dart's own drill rig. And our costs of drilling diamond are about a third of the market price. So we're essentially getting 3 times the amount of meterage for the same spend as we would if we used contractors. Rushworth, again, we've got more field mapping and target identification there, but again, we flew a LiDAR program over that earlier on this year, and quite surprisingly, positively, we turned up a huge number of very consistent historic workings, around about 4,600 workings, historic workings, along a strike around about 6 kilometers. Prior to that LiDAR survey, we had anticipated a strike length of something like maybe 800 to 1,200 meters. And as it happens, it's around about 6K. So a lot of work to do there. We're intending to get our own rig again down to Rushworth immediately. And when I say immediately, in the next week or two, literally, to begin some diamond drilling, mainly around understanding better the structural controls of that historic goldfield. But Rushworth is a very, very interesting project. Other projects, we're looking at the northern or Corryong porphyries. We've got some more mapping to do up there, some more sampling, geochemical sampling, and there is some drilling, but that probably won't happen until next year. Mount Unicorn, some people will know, that's a moly copper silver deposit. It's a very, very large molybdenum deposit. I mean, it's absolutely world scale in terms of tons. It is an inferred and indicated resource. We're getting a metallurgical review done on that down in Tasmania. The samples are there. Back in the day, back in 2012 or thereabouts, there were some issues that came up around the metallurgy. We're confident that new methods of metallurgy will lend themselves very well to solving a few of the open-ended questions we had on metallurgy around Mount Unicorn moly sort of 10 years ago. Buckland Valley, that's a gold show. It's an orogenic gold show. There's, in summary, 17.5 kilometers of strike, still open, soil samples up to 3 grams a tonne at surface. We've done a fair bit of drilling there. There is some particularly good-looking targets that we'd like to drill next year as well, and then Mountain View. But look, I'll move on in the interest of time. That is a quick look at our sort of project pipeline, if you like. You'll see that Mountain View, which is a small gold show, it's got a resource on it. It's small. Mount Unicorn, we're doing some work on that at the moment with the metallurgy, Granite Flat under review, subject to more drilling. You'll see about the center of the page, just above the early stage targets, we've got a bunch of pegmatites there. They're circled in the blue. And obviously, we're working those up as well as we speak. So there's a huge amount of prospectivity within our footprint, and we've got to, drill. That is the key to our success.
James, this pipeline's worth having a look at here. I think we've talked about the fact that Dart is set up perfectly as a project generating junior, and if you can bring these through the pipeline, the idea would be look for partners like you've done with SQM to help move on those. What is your thoughts on projects like Mount Unicorn and Granite Flat?
That's actually a very good point, Pete, because essentially our business model is driven by joint venture relationships. It's unrealistic to expect a mining junior, an exploration junior such as ourselves to develop a 209 million ton moly deposit up at Mount Unicorn. So what we need to get these projects to a point where they're very interesting, tantalizing, if you like, from the point of view of mining majors. And if we can get them to that stage, which many of these are almost, I'd say certainly the Granite Flat, Mount Unicorn, and possibly Copper Quarry are all projects which are at a stage that are interesting enough for joint venture partners to understand a lot better. Let's put it that way. We are actively seeking joint ventures on most of our projects, and we've got preferred types of partners, typically a mining major like SQM, and given that we've got a deal with them, that gives us a great template, if you like, to work off in terms of deal terms, but also within the company at an operational level. So we've not only become a generator of projects, we see ourselves internally with joint venture partners, particularly, as almost an exploration contractor. And that brings certain disciplines and approaches and operational implications with it, and they're all really positive. So as an example of that, we did a massive ESG review earlier on in the year that was sponsored by SQM. And actually, not surprisingly, we did pretty well in it. There were some areas where we needed to improve, such as stakeholder engagement. That really is a big thing with ESG, as you all know. But in terms of the way that we treat the environment and people and permitting and all the rest of it, we scored really well. So ESG is a good example. The other one would be work health and safety, where we have become far more systemized. We now have sort of digital platforms for reporting incidents and all sorts of things like that. And that's been a huge help. It reduces significantly the amount of paperwork involved. It also means that we can get hold of certain data sets that over time will become more valuable in the decision-making process. So moving on and getting towards the end of the presentation here, why would you buy Dart Mining now, and why would you buy it now? So we've got a joint venture project. We've got significant amounts of committed cash, which will go into the ground in further exploration of our lithium prospectivity. We are, by the way, as many would be aware, we're actually the only fairly advanced lithium exploration project on the east coast of Australia. We've had excellent drilling results so far, and we hope that they will continue and even get better in some cases. We've probably got some of the best targets ahead of us, the drill targets. At the moment, with the market doing what it is, we are, in my view, heavily discounted to peers. We're far more advanced in many, many ways than other peer companies, and we're trading at, you know, a third and a quarter of the market cap of some of those players. We have a very tightly held and very supportive shareholder register. We've got a very experienced board and management, and probably geological knowledge of the northeast of Victoria, or Lockenfold Belt for that matter. Not many would come close. So we're very confident in our technical ability. We have a low and very flexible cost structure. We're well equipped physically, and I'll show you those on the next slide, which enables us to put more money into the ground. I believe that we have optimal commodity exposures, i.e. base metals, precious metals, and critical minerals, all of which going forward, once the US dollar abates, and of course we're seeing tremendous strength in the US dollar, and we have done for the last 12 months or so. As a result of that, some of these commodity prices have been whacked, but on the supply side, and when you look at inventories on the base metals, they're really almost at sort of record low levels globally. And, you know, even if there is an economic slowdown, I think that there will continue to be constraints on the supply side, and that usually equals higher prices. So very good demand profile for all of the commodities that we're exposed to. We believe that lithium prices, I know they've corrected, they're at about 20,000 a tonne for lithium carbonate now, but I think that the outlook for demand for lithium will continue to be very strong. There are people and supposed lithium experts predicting supply deficits out to 2030. And on the gold, been in a long period of US dollar sideways movements, been whacked the last couple of days, as most people would know. But eventually the US dollar will stop its rampant bull run, and hopefully interest rates start to stabilize, and we could be in for a long period of price recovery, both in precious metals, in lithium, and in base metals. So Pete, that's about it, and I'll just finish with those few images there that you can see, which try to give people a feel for the way that we operate. And we are very self-sufficient. I mean, we don't rely on outside contractors as much as some might. We use outside contractors on drilling, but actually on the lithium particularly, we're using outside contractors on that. But for all our own stuff, we're using our own rig. We've got our own drillers. We supply our own fuel. We've got our own mobile camps. So cost of accommodation, things like that can really mount. When you've got 10 people in the field, you know, you're talking $2,000 a night for accommodation and food. And, you know, we're feeding our guys for like $28 a head per day. And the accommodation doesn't cost anything. So apart from a few consumables, the camp things worked really well, and it allows us to get very close to the work sites.
I think that's a good point too. Apart from the photograph missing where you're on the hose fighting the bushfires at Midamita a couple of years ago, it does show that operating in Victoria has massive benefits over operating in vast distances of Western Australia, flying in, access to fuel, and as you said, expensive camps. So,
well, that's right. But you know, we're operating in the mountains, and understanding how to access areas within a mountain environment. I mean, you can see that middle one with the that Mack crane truck there with the snow on it. You know, we're drilling at 1,240 meters earlier on this year. There are special skills and safety issues around access, and we have refined that ourselves. We know best how to get into these areas and whatever. We've got a great operations team who get us into these places safely and out again. So, you know, we had a contract driller recently that finished in June. We had to get them in onto the site, the drill site. We had to get them out, and there's like 20 or 30 Ks of essentially goat tracks to get them in and out. But they were pretty much incapable of doing it themselves. So it's a specialist skill. We've developed it. We've got it in-house, and it's actually far more important than people might realise. Some of that core that you can see there is actually pegmatite laid out in our core yard, which is based in Wodonga. So operations base in Wodonga, got a big yard and a few container shelters and things like that. And yeah, that's how we operate.
Well, let's talk about the pegmatites, James. I mean, to attract for a company of your size, to attract a global major to explore on the East Coast, as you said, the only pigment or lithium exploration results probably on the East Coast. You've proven the concept that those lithium rocks, the rocks there are lithium-bearing rocks, and now it's a matter of working out how much there might be. Talk to us about what SQM views this particular deposit, the dike swarms, and the style of mineralization.
Well, it is. I mean, for a start, it's a large area, right? If you look at Mount Holland, which is a lithium mine in Western Australia, joint ventured by Wesfarmers and SQM, funnily enough. If you look at Mount Holland, it's a massive slab of pegmatite, which is very rich in lithium. What we've got is slightly different. We've literally got thousands of pegmatites, varying in size, certainly at surface. And the first 3 holes that we reported earlier on this year, people sort of commented to me, oh, they're low grade and all that, but it wasn't, we didn't have any massive hits on it, I agree, in terms of grade. But what we were looking for on that program were the tons. You have to prove up the tons before you intensively drill a pegmatite system for the high grade. So where we're at in terms of tons and grade at the moment is, I think we've proven that we've got scale on the ton side, and certainly we've reported some, very high lithium oxide grades, and hopefully we get into the thick of that in a few of these dikes, and suddenly we could be looking at a project. So, yeah.
And James, lithium comes in different forms. In many cases, it's a chemistry set. It's not just hard rock, 100 meters of 1%. If you can have a low grade that's easily beneficiated through ore sorting or the chemistry, that also can make a difference. Is the rock style there amenable to recovery and beneficiation?
Well, again, actually not a bad question. And for the listeners, you probably wouldn't believe me if I said Pete hadn't run these questions past me. He didn't. What we need is proximal tons. So you can have a whole bunch of relatively small pegmatite dikes that can, equal a resource, 10 million tons, 20, 30, 50 million, who knows? So another fascinating thing, and I know that SQM were interested in this, was that we've actually got 4 different types of lithium mineralization in existence in the Dorchap Lithium Project. And they are spodumene, which late last year we did a series of systematic rock chip sampling across a lot of different dikes, and 70% of the dikes came up spodumene. So it is, in terms of the dike swarm, it appears to be dominantly spodumene, although we have some lepidolite further south down at Glen Wills. Lepidolite is, I think, lithium extracted from lepidolite equals about 5 to 10% of global supply at the moment, very likely over time to increase, because we are not going to meet our zero emissions targets without an enormous amount of lithium. And there's probably just nowhere near available spodumene, which is 90% of the global market supply at the moment. There is not enough spodumene that's certainly been discovered to date to supply the lithium that's going to be required based on those zero emission targets. So SQM were very interested in the project because of the existence of the 4 different minerals, lithium minerals. So they are spodumene, pedalite, lepidolite, and amblygonite, which is a phosphate rock. They were interested, curious, like technically very interested in it from that point of view. And that's what I think sparked their initial interest. But in terms of lepidolite being a source of supply for lithium going forward, it's a question of when. It's not, sorry, and when it could be 3, 4, 5 years, lepidolite will take more of the supply, if you like, going forward. But at the moment, the processes and things are all set up for spodumene, and our deposit or our pegmatite swarm appears to be dominantly spodumene at the moment. So we're happy with that.
And James, the drilling so far is exploration drilling. You're proving up the mineralization, and you've got some other targets there that the program looked towards. At what stage do you start thinking about a resource drilling? Is that, will you just take what you've got so far as a greater body, or would there be a plan to move into a more targeted infill type program?
Well, look, everything's targeted, if you like, at the moment, but it's still exploratory for sure. What we were trying to establish in the early part of the last drill program that we completed was tonnes. So, as I mentioned earlier, there's absolutely no point in high-grade lithium without the tonnes to back it up. So you've got to establish whether the tonnes are there first. So, for example, round one of the groups of dikes that we drilled on that 3,000-metre program, we were drilling around what we interpreted to be the outer edges of the system, so as to establish the boundaries. And surprise to us, we did find plenty of pegmatite at I wouldn't say the extremes, but certainly around about where we thought the pegmatites would finish. And we probably hit a lot more pegmatite than we had anticipated. Now, that basically means that there's probably more tonnes there than we'd anticipated. And we will start focusing in, as I said, next year's program in March is on the Gosport dikes. That's the target at the moment. And I say at the moment, that is the target, and that's the one we're getting permitting on, and all the rest of it. And that is dominantly, certainly, in fact, almost exclusively from our XRD analysis, that is spodumene. And it has to date, I think, thrown up the best high-grade rock chips that we've taken. So, yeah, that will be an interesting one. It is clearly from surface, it appears to offer the tonnes as well.
James, that's going to be pretty exciting, watching one of the world's largest lithium players work on that program with you in this new lithium region, which hopefully we'll get some more good news on. Victoria is often slated as a place that's difficult to do mining in. You've got exploration permits, so that's the first start. There are mineral sands projects which are being permitted in the west part of the state. Talk to us about the framework and the environment within which you work for progressing these projects.
Yeah, well, good question, Pete. I mean, Victoria, by most people, certainly from outside of Victoria, a lot of people are a bit suspicious, if you like, of what goes on here. I'd say two things on that. We have a vegetation offset requirement in Victoria, as does New South Wales, Queensland, and in fact, I think it is legislated across every state. Some states have been slower than others to pick up on it, but we are our own provider of vegetation offset, and that may not mean a lot to people, but I can assure you that it makes a huge difference to the amount of to the cost of drilling. That 2-kilometre track I mentioned earlier on that we're having to put into the Gosport dikes, for example, that would have been an offset somewhere around $500,000, and that would have been cash that we would have to pay. But we are actually a first-party provider, so we can provide that into the joint venture at zero cost if we elect to. Victoria otherwise is fine. SQM, well, you can imagine that they would have been doing their due diligence. They would have been asking themselves the same question before they signed up to do the work and spend the money with us. And, they have satisfied themselves that there is not a major issue in Victoria, certainly when it comes to lithium. I'd suggest that there are some other fantastic examples of good operating mines in Victoria that people generally don't watch too closely. Probably the best known might be Fosterville, which is the highest yielding gold mine of any size in the world. So Victoria is a fine place to operate from our perspective. If we get, and we have intimate relationships with the departments, various departments and stakeholders, including the newly named DECA, which is the old DELP, which is the Department of Climate Change and Resources, essentially. We have very good relationships there. We have excellent relationships with the regulator, ERR, Earth Resources. And, you know, we've been operating up here for a long time. I think that there's trust between them and us, and we always go the extra 10% or the extra mile, if you like, to ensure that where we've been, we're properly rehabilitated and fixed up. So operating in Victoria for us is not a problem. I think when people come from other jurisdictions where things might be, you know, less accountability, that sort of thing, or less enforcement and whatever, I think that's when they struggle and complain. But once you get used to operating here and once you know how it works, it's fine, absolutely fine.
That's a good summary. And I think you've covered some of the key topics here for shareholders at the moment about where DART is today and where it's going to tomorrow. What are some of the three key things we can look forward to from DART over the next few months, and why it's attractive right now?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think, you know, if we're going to be self-critical, I think maybe DART's not marketed itself terribly aggressively. And we've kind of been overlooked by various broking shops and all that sort of thing. And we are now making an effort we're going to do a monthly webinar, just a 5-minute update on what we've been doing and what we're planning to do. We have engaged with a lot more stockbroking firms and things like that, as you know, Pete, to try and get some traction with them amongst their investors and that sort of thing. And yeah, I think in terms of where we're going, I think the important things are that we're better engaged with our shareholders and prospective investors, etc. We have got, the other thing we've got to look forward to is some long delayed results coming out on Granite Flat, which I expect we'll have out fairly soon. We've got more results coming on the recent lithium program that we finished in June. We've got the startup of the we've got more ground truthing results and stuff that we're carrying out at the moment, more geochemical analysis on the lithium as well. And then, of course, early next year, we'll be drilling the Gosport dikes, which we are, you know, really very positively disposed towards. So I think there's a lot. We've got lots of news flow. We have taken internally the idea of trying to get more news flow out to the marketplace and to keep our shareholders and investors better informed. We're going to make a real effort on that. And I think that's obviously in these markets really important. But look, the stock is dirt cheap in my view, but I think in most people would agree we are very cheap, certainly from a market cap point of view, given that we've got $10.2 million to spend on lithium exploration, as well as moving our own assets along as and when we have resources available to do that. And when I say resources, I mean personnel mostly. If we're not, you know, the priority is the lithium, and that gets the priority allocation of resources. But when we can move resources from the lithium to our own drilling and our own assets and things like that, we will do that as quick as we can.
Terrific. Thank you, James. Pretty good overview. As you said, cheap, but punching above your weight with a lot of projects in that pipeline. So I look forward to sending that out to shareholders and the market to see what you've got coming through. Thanks for everybody's time here today. And if you have any questions, please email them through to me, peter@nwrcommunications.com.au. I'll get them to James. James, thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks, everyone, for attending, and thanks, Pete.